You're listening to Materials Business, the podcast where engineering, leadership, and innovation meet diversity and inclusion. Hosted by Monica Hernandez, engineer, entrepreneur, and industry advocate. When we embrace different perspectives, we create stronger industries, smarter solutions, and lasting impact. Now, let's dive in.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when are you watching us. And thank you for being part of the material business community. My name is Monica Hernandez, and I'm your host. And I have a super amazing guest, Sofia Izaguirre. Thank you for being here. Gracias.
Of course, thank you for having me. I'm very excited. This is the first time I do something like this.
It's amazing. You'll do super good. And I'm very excited because the audience is going to learn today about materials that are going to be used in this what so we call the transition. And we talk about this subject a lot. We have spoken about other specialists and other subject matter experts on copper and the depletion of earth materials and so many other elements. So it's very interesting. And what we want to talk today is how can we create, or what are the alternatives for those materials that exist today that we know are not going to be sufficient enough? We won't have them in like unlimited supply. And how can we bridge that gap and then completing the transition? So I hope you guys stay. And for everyone that is listening into the other platforms, thank you for being here. And without further ado, Sofia, tell us, who are you?
Thanks, Monica. Who am I? Wow, that's a deep question. So I was born and raised in Honduras. It's a small country in Central America, for those who aren't familiar. I was born there and I lived there for the first 10 years of my life, which then we made a big move with my family to Maryland, which is another small state here in the US. And I grew up there for, probably my teenage years, I would say. And then I ended up moving back to Honduras to graduate high school from there. There was just a lot of back and forth with my family, which, it happens. But it was definitely, I had quite the culture shock when I moved to America because, things here are very different compared to a small third world country in Central America. So that was interesting, but I think everything builds character in this life. And after graduating high school, I moved back to the US, but this time I came to Houston, Texas, which is where I am right now. And my goal was always to go into medicine. I wanted to be a doctor. But my sister, my oldest sister, so both my sisters are doctors, but my oldest sister, I lived with her when she was going through her first year of med school. And thank goodness that I did, because it opened my eyes to what it's like to be in med school. And it completely changed my mind. I was like, I do not want to go to med school anymore. So I had always been good at math and I always liked, math and science. And my dad's an engineer. He's a mechanical engineer. So I figured it seems like a good intersection between medicine and engineering. I found this career called biomedical engineering. So I got my bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering at the University of Houston. And so then COVID happened and I was scared that I wasn't going to get a job because it was a chaotic year, especially employment. People were getting laid off. They weren't getting hired. So I found this job posting for a company called DexMat. And I was like, DexMat, who is she? And it was just a part-time laboratory technician position, but I took it. And that quickly progressed. Like within 6 months, I got hired on full time to be a materials engineer for the company. And, this was back when DexMat was a very small company. It was a very small business. This was back in 2021. And in 2023, there was this big technology breakthrough that opened up a path to produce Galvorn, which is the material that we make at DexMat, at a very much higher throughput, much, much faster, much more affordable. So the whole mission of the company kind of changed from just being a small business that makes a product and sells it to actually having this mission of producing this conductive material that is the lightest, the strongest, and most flexible conductive material available today, and truly unlock applications that were previously being restricted by the conductive materials that are available today. Maybe not restricted, but paying some sort of trade-off. There's always a trade-off that you have with these conductive materials available today. At DexMat, we're providing an alternative solution to that. So yeah, that's who Sofia is. Career-wise, I'm also a sister, an aunt. I love dancing and riding my bike, and I love listening to podcasts. So it's really nice to be here with you today.
Thank you. And thank you for that total introduction. And then you gave our audience already a little sneak peek of what we're going to talk about. And you mentioned some concepts there. So, why is that necessity to have a different material?
Well, everything that we see and touch everywhere is made from something, right? Is made from a material. And the reason it behaves the way it behaves is because of the material properties. You know, the table that I have my laptop on has a dense, rough surface because of the wood that made it. And so the materials that you work with have a strong impact or influence on how your product will behave. And currently, when you think of conductive materials, they're everywhere. And I think people don't realize how much of an everyday thing it is. You have conductive materials everywhere, especially
Uh-huh.
now with the AI boom and data centers needing to be more efficient and having higher power and wattage outputs. You know, conductive materials are everywhere. And so when you think of copper, copper is a great conductor, but it's very heavy and it's not very strong. It basically only provides that one benefit, which is it's great at conducting electricity. So when you think of sectors or industries like aerospace, where every single gram of weight matters and every single gram of weight is tied to a dollar value, if you can shave off a little bit of weight in those cables or in any other conductive material inside an aircraft, for example, that will lead to long-term fuel savings. You can have a longer range. You can have a higher payload capacity. It essentially just opens up a lot of other opportunities that would otherwise be restricted with a metal like a copper or aluminum, aluminum is considered the lightweight conductor, right? But the material Galvorn is actually even lighter than aluminum. So yeah, I would say that would be the reason why we would need alternative materials, just to open up opportunity.
So that's a really good. And when you were talking, I remember a podcast that we recorded with Dr. Alicia Valero, and she is in the University of Zaragoza in Spain. She has done a lot of research on materials and all those elements that are not are in depletion actually on the earth. And then she brought a point on, because the counterpoint to that is like, but we recycle. So we send that to, and then, but the counterpoint to that is, yeah, but some elements get lost in that recycling process just because we put everything together, right? It's like we send to the foundry the piece of car with the piece of valve that have that nickel and copper alloys, and then a little piece of lamp and a little piece of, I don't know, my fridge, and then that together. And then obviously those elements are not economically feasible to recover. So that is, and I know we were talking about that, we don't have unlimited amount of resources, speaking about copper.
And
Is that
not only is it unlimited, but it's also not controlled by, the West. For example, like the US has no control over copper mining, which usually happens on the other side of the world. So that's another point to consider, is the supply chain aspect of it, as well as the scarcity of it.
exactly? So we are time points here for you guys. What is this new material, like, material business? We speak about all the materials, right? So it's like, is this plastic? Is this a ceramic? Is this like, it's not a metallic, or it is maybe? Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, so the trade name for the product is called Galvorn. The origins have to do with Lord of the Rings, which I can just imagine like the founders of the company in a dark room just like nerding out about what to name the material. And if any of our listeners are big Lord of the Rings fans, you might understand the reference. But anyway, so Galvorn is a conductor that's made of carbon. It's an advanced carbon material, and it comes in a fiber form. So if you picture a black thread, essentially, because it behaves like a thread, it's very flexible. Because when you think of conductive materials, you think of metals, which tend to be rigid and solid. So this is not rigid or solid. It's like basically a thread that's very, very mechanically strong. It's very lightweight. We can run it through textile equipment, such as like a stitching, sewing machine, embroidery machine. That's how flexible it is. You won't break it if you're like stitching through it and running it through very high stress environments. So yeah, it's an advanced carbon material, and the real benefit of it is the combination of properties, because with copper, again, it's a conductor, but it's heavy. So you have these trade-offs of weight and conductivity, or weight and flexibility. With Galvorn, you can have the advantage of having a lightweight conductor that's also very flexible and very strong. And it just opens up the door to design new geometries that couldn't have been thought of, or, yeah, just opening up the door to new, like, I think, yeah, basically, I would say that.
Yeah, new technologies and everywhere. I mean, you mentioned the aerospace, but I am thinking maybe one of the questions that I had in mind is, can you 3D print with this material?
So that's been in early development. We haven't like actually deployed a 3D printed part with Galvorn, but yeah, that is something that has been looked into because it is a fiber material.
Exactly.
Problem, the problem with it is that it actually you can't melt it. It's
Yeah,
quite resistive to heat. So with a 3D printer, you usually like extrude these fibers that are melted. Will have to be a little bit of workaround, which is something that we've seen, with our customers. You're working with a new material. You will have to treat it differently. You will have to open up your mind a little bit and think of new ways of working with it, because it is an innovative material. But once you crack the code, you'll realize that the possibilities are endless.
that's amazing. And I'm just imagining it is like, oh my God, so many applications. And we were talking about, this energy transition that everyone is talking about. And our leaders went and then met somewhere. And then they said, yeah, we are going. And then we have some extra values coming out of something like this. For example, what you were mentioning, it's going to be lighter. So you will use less diesel or less fuel.
Correct.
Therefore, you will emit less, like emissions to the atmosphere. So, in an overall, it helps in a little bit of everything that is throughout the cycle. So, it's very interesting. Which other industries are using this material?
So I mentioned aerospace, but specifically cable and wire, because again, a lightweight conductor that's very flexible and strong is highly desirable. We've also been seeing a lot of progress in the advanced textiles industry, because again, this is a conductive thread. If you think of, for the military, for defense specifically, they like to introduce functionalities to their suits. So if you have a conductive thread that is sewn into your suit, you can start having biometric sensing. You can start sensing your heart rate, your oxygen levels. You can do electrostatic dissipation, which for, spacesuits for the NASA, where they get covered in like space dust, that's a useful application there. And also composites. So when you think of composites, you think of carbon fiber, which is like very much widely adopted by now. A lot of aircraft even is made out of carbon fiber composites. But carbon fiber is really strong. It's great. However, it's not as nearly as conductive as Galvorn, for example. So what we do with our customers is they take Galvorn and they stitch it through these composite panels to now functionalize the composites. So now the composites can do lightning strike protection. They can have embedded sensors where the composite itself is the sensors. So say the structure gets hit by a bird or a stone or whatever, that damage can be detected live because there's a sensor in the composite. And it's not adding a lot of weight because again, it's lightweight. And actually, typically, I mentioned lightning strike protection because a lot of aircraft have a metal mesh in the body that's used for exactly that, for for lightning strike protection and EMI shielding. But those meshes, because they're metal, they're heavy. So being able to take out the mesh completely and simply introduce that conductive material into the body itself saves you space, saves you weight, and just adds functionality to the aircraft. So those are some of the, I would say wire and cable, advanced textiles, and composites are three of the main industries that we've been having a lot of cluster of customers in.
It's a lot of really cool stuff, like you were talking, and I was imagining those, futuristic movies where they have the panel here and then they can measure things on their bodies, and pretty
It's
cool.
it makes it difficult to deliver this message of we are producing this material at scale and it's being sold and shipped and implemented into systems today because it is, I guess, so futuristic or perceived as kind of like magic. It is a magical material, but it's also very real and it's being produced and sold and implemented.
Interesting. I'm glad that, I get to get this conversation. I'm so excited. Like, it's really cool. And then it's really cool, especially for listeners that are new to the industry, And then I remember when I told my mom that I wanted to be a metallurgical engineer, she cried because she
Happy tears
pictured
or
me.
sad tears?
No, sad tears because my grandpa, I didn't know at the time, right? My grandpa had a foundry, and then he was all, dirty all day and then sweaty because they were in the foundry. And then my mom was like, "Oh my God, what are you going to be doing?"
She thought you were going to be doing that.
Exactly, because that's the only reference they had at a time. But now, like, I picture those little kids that I volunteer with at the school, and then open their avenues for engineering. Is like, oh my God, you could be working in materials that are going to be able to help people in those technologies that are like futuristic, but we have them now.
Yeah. I mean, think about how many times you're frustrated with something because it doesn't work the way you want it to. That's usually a lot of the times it's not a design constraint, it's a material constraint. And we can only do what the material allows us to do. So having a new material is just, this happens, every so often. If you think about carbon fiber is still relatively expensive and not like super mass produced as other materials are, but 30 years ago, so many things weren't even possible because carbon fiber didn't exist. And 30 years from now, we'll have so many things that will be adopted because Galvorn exists today. Yeah. I think making people aware that materials are extremely important in our everyday lives is important.
It is. And I know this episode is going to air later, but on April 24th, we celebrate Corrosion Awareness Day. And it's a day, it's not to celebrate corrosion because who likes corrosion, right?
Nobody.
Yeah, like we love to prevent it. And it's the awareness of, it's not only a materials engineer problem, it's not only the corrosionist problem, it's a problem because the dollars that we pay for our taxes are going to be better used if you have other solutions. So it's really cool. So how does it feel to be working in something that is, a different and
Yeah, it's honestly exciting. I mean, working for a startup is interesting. I think that's the best word to describe it because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work and I like that because I like the ownership of my work and I like that what I'm doing every day will have a real world effect on people's lives. It's a very fast paced environment. You have to be open and comfortable with changing your entire mindset and what you're working on from one day to the other, you have to be comfortable with that because so many things are changing every day. I mean, we literally learn something every day, and what we learn will in turn change our trajectory. And yeah, it's also I was the only woman in the company for many years. Now we have a few women, which is great, but I am still the only woman at the production facility. And it's funny because my role nowadays has turned a little more hybrid. Like I have the opportunity to work from home because I'm doing a lot of customer calls and computer work that doesn't necessarily need me to be in the office. But I'm like, I can't stop going to the production facility because then it'll just be 5 dudes staring at each other. They need my presence in there, I would think.
Absolutely. And how does it feel for you to be the only one and the first one?
It was pretty cool. It was honestly really cool. I was the youngest for a while as well. I still am in the full team. I'm the youngest person. So a lot of the times, like I go into a call or I go into a room and I was the only woman and the youngest person in the room. So that felt intimidating at times for sure. But it also made me feel like I'm in the right place because I will only continue to be pushed more. And even though I feel like sometimes I need to prove myself more than I would need to if I were a man, for example, it strives me to work harder. It strives me to not conform and settle for what I have now because I know I have to work harder. And that's okay. I'm open to it. But honestly, my colleagues are extremely, open and grateful to have me and I don't feel like they're so supportive. They're so supportive. I mean, and it'll be 5 years since I've been at DexMat in May, and this is the only job I've had. It's a professional engineer. This is the only job that I've known for my entire adult life. So sometimes I feel like I got a little spoiled because I was lucky to have such a great job out of college. And yeah, I'm extremely grateful to be here.
I don't think so. I think you're in the right place and I think you are earning that because you're working hard, and what you said earlier about proving yourself, that is, I think every female that has come to the podcast has said that. So it's not unknown to the audience that definitely there are things that can be better. And I'm very glad you had a really good experience to begin with, because that probably sometimes determines the trajectory of your career. And then having supportive people around you pushes you to be the best that you can be.
Definitely.
And then give all of you. So if there are leaders listening to this, it's like give that opportunity to that person that doesn't look like you, to
Definitely.
speaks different than you, to eats different than you, to because that is what brings good collaboration. I think there is no one episode in this podcast that we haven't spoken about the power of collaboration and having a team that is diverse. So it's
Because when you're working with someone who grew up completely different from you, they will bring a whole different perspective. They will bring ideas that you wouldn't have thought of because they've been exposed to different environments. They've had to be resourceful. And so when you need to be resourceful, you think of ideas outside of the box. You're a great brainstormer, I have found. So I agree 100%. Having a diverse work environment is extremely efficient, I would say.
yeah. And then also promoting that supportiveness, and then that it's not me against you, but it's like, oh man, that's so cool. How can I help you? And
Yeah.
then we can do this together. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, to me, it's natural. I know industry is not like that, but that's why I am not in industry anymore and I created my own company.
I love that
But
for
it's
you.
cool that, there are teams that promote that because it's important. You cannot have someone that hates going to the job that you're giving because that person is not fully there.
It's not fully there, and they also won't fight for you. And in a startup environment, you need fighters. Like you need people who are committed to make this company a success because in a team that's made up of 11 people, if one person is falling behind, then that's 1/10 of the company falling behind. And you really need people that are committed and are willing to put in the long days when they're needed to make this company a success. And hopefully that day will come.
It will, definitely. I mean, with a lot of people, I always say this is, and my son probably tired of hearing me saying that, but it's where you put your energy, that's where you go, right? Is if you're looking to solutions, you will get this solution, the answers delivered to you. You don't even have to work for it. It's like, but how are you using that? So I'm very glad that you guys are working in that. So you are US based and most of your clients, I'm assuming, are US. Are you doing some international work?
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of international customers. I would say right now, one of our biggest, the one of the biggest cable manufacturers that we're working with is actually based in Europe. So yeah, we ship globally. Of course, we like working with our US partners, but materials are needed everywhere. And sometimes you find that a lot of development or R&D agencies move faster in Europe than they do here in the US. Like US is great for adoption once a material is ready, but I find that some of our development efforts move a little faster with our European customers.
Found that too. Like guests in the podcast have said that before. Is like the amount of dollars that get used in research and development is like significantly higher even than like in Canada, right?
Yeah, but I will say in the US, we do have a lot of, we work directly with the Department of Defense. So, like the Air Force, we work very closely with the Air Force, and they are very supportive of our R&D efforts. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of it is here in the US as well, but I would say it's a combination of the two.
And that's amazing. And that comes back to the collaboration piece we were talking before. Like, how can we implement ideas that, I don't know, maybe there is an environment that is very specific and has characteristics that is better studied in, I don't know, northern climate than in
Right.
Texas.
That's actually a good point. Yeah. Because the material will behave a little different when exposed to different environments. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, have you had any, like, oh my God, we tried this, it didn't really work, probably is not meant for this in particular environment?
Many of those, many of those. I mean, there was a point when back in 2023, when this breakthrough happened, right? We were like, all right, we can make so much material. Now we need to find where the best fit for it is. And you mentioned earlier, you could think of so many applications that this could go into. That's actually more a problem than it is a good thing because you can't, I mean, the applications are endless, but you need to actually focus. You need to narrow it down to specific sectors and specific applications within those sectors because it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to open the wrong door and go down a rabbit hole and then just to realize, oh, wow, this is not the right fit at all. For example, the material is very cut resistant. It is very good at resisting impact and cuts. So of course, naturally you think, oh, like cut resistant garments that are used in hockey or ice skating, because I don't know if you remember, there was this really big accident where someone died on the ice because they got slashed in the neck by someone's, I don't know if I should be mentioning, I'm sorry.
I was an ice skater, so definitely I know, and
Yeah.
I know firsthand.
Yeah, so trigger warning, I just mentioned something triggering, but so yeah, so obviously there is a huge need for protective gear or neck guards specifically that are made of a high cut resistant material. So this was something that we were super interested in. We were like, okay, great. But then this was back 3 years ago. And we realized after spending money and time into cut resistant tests and spending money and time on getting in touch with the right people and the right companies, that we just didn't have the volumes necessary at the time to make like thousands and thousands of yards. Because when you think of textile industry is massive, massive. And that's why materials like polyester and cotton, the materials used for that, because they are produced at a massive scale. And at that point in 2023, we just weren't in the position where we could provide these massive volumes, right? We could be now, we probably are now, but at the time we weren't. And so that was a big learning lesson for us, which is you need to understand the volume and the pricing requirements when you're talking to these customers. Even if the application is super interesting and Galvorn would be great for it, you need to understand the entire market. And so, yeah, that's just one of many examples of the applications that we thought would be a great idea for us at the time and were not at the time. The timing is very important.
Yeah. And I like you mentioned that because we often, when we realize something like, I don't know, Apple, when we learned about Apple, they were already huge, right? It's like we didn't learn about Apple when they started in the garage. We didn't learn about, I don't know, all the big things. So it's interesting that we hear from someone that has been in that it's just resilience. It's just, okay, we tried. It wasn't for us, not a biggie. Start in another way and then focus your energy like we said before. And I think we have that naturally because you are already far from your hometown where you were born, and you went back and forth and back and in another state. And
Yeah.
so it's having that resilience and that ability to adapt, I find is really necessary.
If I could put that on my resume, I would, because
I
adaptability and resilience, man, I am made of that. Yeah, no, that's such a good point. And I think that's like I mentioned earlier, in a startup environment, you need to be able to switch gears. Like we just spent 2 weeks working on this project, and now we realize this is not the right project for us. So we're going to scratch everything and start new tomorrow on this new project. And it can be frustrating for sure, but it's also just a matter of that adaptability and being able to respond to a new environment like I did growing up.
a material.
Precisely.
So here is two material engineers telling the world that you are just a material. So adapt
You're just
or
another
change.
material.
That's pretty cool. We are almost getting to the end. I told you, Sofia, when we started this, it's like, oh my God, it's a blink of an
That's
eye. And
crazy. Yeah, that went by really quickly.
So what would you tell the listeners that maybe there is someone that is, I don't know, in the edge of taking a decision, or is like, should I do this? Should I not do that? What should I do with my life? And then I'll tell you why I'm asking that question.
Wait, so you're asking what should I tell someone who's like on the verge of making a decision?
A decision for life or going into, a career or big change.
Yeah, honestly, I would say don't overthink it. Go with your gut, because overthinking is a sword that will just continue to go through you until you realize that you never made a decision, whether it's from fear or from past experiences where you think that you rushed to a decision that wasn't the correct one. Well, guess what? Making that mistake gave you the lesson that you needed to learn to then avoid that mistake later on, because we're not meant to be perfect. We're not meant to make the right decisions right away. We're meant to make decisions, learn from them, and take that knowledge to our next whatever we're working on. That's what I would say.
Infinity growth.
Exactly. Exactly.
I asked you that question because this week I had a mentee that I have, and she called me and she's like in panic mode, and she's like, how should I do this career or that career? And I like medicine, but I also like to be engineer, and I also like so many things, and in a confusion. And I said, well, are you gonna cut your arm, or are you gonna, is any of those decisions gonna get any part of your body dismantled or something that is irreversible for you? And she thinks for a second and she's like, no. Okay, then just go and do it. And then if it doesn't work, come back. It's like,
Try again.
it's not
Try
because
something different.
It's not because you didn't, and you said it at the beginning, I left with my sister and I thought in my heart that I was to be a doctor. And then I had that first, the opportunity to be first hand with that person. And I'm like, hell, this is not for me. right? Like I wanted to be a policewoman when I was little, and I drew all because the uniforms were pretty. I think that's the reason. And I found the drawings when you were a kid, and then you draft yourself. And I'm like, oh my God, I would have really not liked that. Like I wasn't meant for that big life.
Yeah.
So nothing, going back to your point, is not something irreversible. It's not that you're gonna, take an eyeball out of your body. It's like you're just taking a decision. Take it, learn from it. Good if it works. If it doesn't, good because you learned, and then
Exactly.
continue.
It's also
And then that takes a lot of weight.
yeah, and this is the first time we're living. I mean, this is the first time that our current consciousness is going through this experience, and I think we tend to be very harsh with ourselves. I do it a lot. I'm very harsh with myself because I have very high standards, because I didn't have a lot of room in my life for failure, because things were always changing, and I had to kind of take care of myself a lot of the time. But you're also just human, and I try to like think back to my 10-year-old self who had this massive change in her life, and I try to tell her like it's going to be okay. Look where you are now. It all led to this moment. It all led to me here speaking to Monica Hernandez on this podcast, and that's how it was supposed to happen. So I agree with you. Nothing is permanent.
Love it. Love it. We're at the end, Sofia. Why do you think people need to listen to the Material Business podcast?
I think people need to listen to the Material Business podcast because I think people need to care about materials. I think that the world is changing so rapidly, everything is getting electrified. We want faster Wi-Fi. We want, AI to generate responses faster. And all of that is made with a conductive material. You want a cheaper flight to go visit your mom? Well, if that airplane was a little lighter, maybe the prices would be cheaper. I'm not sure, but I'm just saying, I think learning about materials transition is something that people should do as a normal human being who cares about the world. This podcast is helping us educate on that.
I love it. What is your last message for the audience, Sofia?
This message for the audience: take care of yourselves. Go out and take a walk outside and breathe in some fresh air if the weather allows you to today. And also, if you have any questions on Galvorn, go to DexMat.com. You can find us on LinkedIn or X, Twitter, and feel free to reach out to me if you think that Galvorn would be a good material for your application.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming, for sharing with such, passion and warmth. I always love to speak with all of my guests. It's like, oh my God, if I was thinking maybe we can do a party someday in Hawaii and bring everyone from all over the world.
Oh,
And
yeah, that would be amazing.
business party there. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much again. And then for the audience, keep posted. We'll have some other amazing guests coming into, and then we watch each other on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Thanks for listening to the Materials Business Podcast. Feel free to visit infinitygrowth.ca to see show notes and explore other episodes. If there's someone you think should hear this episode, please share with them. Take care of yourself and have a great rest of your day.